Be me, property manager for the Northwood Acres Homeowners Association. It is a small, quiet, cul-de-sac community of 20 well-maintained houses. Most residents have lived here for decades, raising families, retiring in peace. My job is usually just administrative, dealing with landscaping contractors, collecting dues, and occasionally reminding someone to trim a hedge or paint a mailbox. The biggest drama used to be Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning petunias being nibbled by deer. Be not me, Sterling Blackwood, early 40s, I guess. New money if the rumors from the realtor were to be believed. He bought the largest house on the cul-de-sac, the one at the very end, overlooking the small, protected creek bed. He drives a ridiculously oversized German SUV, always parked half on the sidewalk. From the moment he arrived 6 months ago, Sterling had an aura of entitlement that radiated like cheap cologne. His first words to me were a demand, not a greeting. He wanted to tear out the meticulously maintained mature magnolia tree in his front yard. Said it blocked his feng shui and the view for his new smart home camera system. I politely informed him that the magnolia was a protected species within Northwood Acres bylaws, and also covered by a city ordinance due to its age and contribution to the local ecosystem. There were specific permits required for removal and often replanting requirements. Sterling scoffed. He leaned back in his expensive office chair, his tailored shirt perfectly uncreased. He said with a dismissive wave of his hand, "Permits are for poor people who can't afford to just get things done. I own this property now. I'll do what I want." He then suggested that I, as the property manager, should just handle any paperwork or fines. He implied it was my job to make his life easy, even if it meant breaking rules. I calmly explained that my job was to enforce the bylaws, not circumvent them. I showed him the relevant sections in the HOA covenants, highlighting the fines for unauthorized tree removal. He just stared at me, his eyes cold and unblinking, as if he couldn't comprehend being told no. He grumbled something about small-town dictators and infringement on property rights before I left, the magnolia tree still standing sentinel. A few weeks later, Sterling decided our quiet cul-de-sac needed more vibrancy. That meant throwing pool parties every weekend, complete with blaring club music and flashing lights that spilled out onto the street. The noise started early afternoon and often continued well past midnight. Calls began coming in from Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Rodriguez, and others, complaining, losing sleep, their grandchildren visiting and being woken up. I sent Sterling the HOA reminder about quiet hours, which started at 10 p.m. on weekends. I also included a copy of the city's noise ordinance, which was even stricter. His response was an email, all caps, stating, "I am hosting private events on my private property. You have no jurisdiction." He called me too, yelling about how he paid a premium to live here and should be allowed to enjoy his home. During that call, Sterling actually proposed that I selectively enforce the rules. "Look," he'd said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I can make it worth your while. A little bonus for looking the other way. Say for all the extra work you do for me." The offer was thinly veiled. I politely declined, citing my professional ethics and the HOA's strict code of conduct. I documented the exact time and content of that conversation. His next grand idea was to expand his driveway. He wanted a triple-wide entrance, not just for his SUV, but for what he called his fleet of luxury vehicles. He wanted a grander aesthetic, he said, something that properly announced his arrival. He sketched out a sprawling design on a piece of paper, completely ignoring the property lines and the existing layout. It looked like a small parking lot. I reviewed the architectural guidelines for Northwood Acres. Driveway expansions required HOA board approval and city permits. Crucially, the plan Sterling presented would extend the concrete pad several feet onto the common-use drainage easement that ran along the side of his property, and also infringe about 3 feet onto the edge of my own front yard, where a small, decorative stone border currently sat. My property directly abutted his on that side. I sent him an email with the relevant sections of the bylaws and the city code, specifically pointing out the easement and property line restrictions. I attached a copy of the existing property survey maps, clearly showing the boundaries. My email stated, in no uncertain terms, that his proposed expansion was not permissible without significant revisions and proper permitting, and that any encroachment onto the easement or my property would result in immediate action. Sterling's reply was terse. Noted, I'm going ahead. You want to live in a museum, fine. I want to live in a mansion. He then informed me he had already hired a contractor and work would begin the following Monday. He added, it's your job to manage this community. If you don't want my property values to increase everyone's, then that's on you. His arrogance was boundless, his confidence in his own impunity absolute. Monday morning, bright and early, the heavy machinery arrived. A small excavator, a cement mixer truck, and a crew of half a dozen workers. They immediately began digging. I watched from my porch, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand. They ripped out my decorative stone border, then started leveling the ground, clearly extending beyond Sterling's legal property line. They were creating a massive, sprawling concrete pad that ate into the common easement and onto my land. They also started laying the foundation for a massive, ornate stone gate structure at the new, wider entrance. Our bylaws only allowed for small, decorative fences up to 4 feet high. This gate, even in its foundational stage, was clearly going to be at least 8 feet, and its footprint further encroached onto the easement and my property. It was aggressive, ostentatious, and flagrantly illegal on multiple fronts. I walked over. The foreman, a tired-looking man named Dave, seemed genuinely confused when I pointed out the property line markers, now partially obscured by fresh digging. Boss told us to just follow the stakes Mr. Blackwood put out, Dave mumbled. I showed him my printed property survey. He just shrugged. Orders are orders. Then Sterling himself emerged in a silk bathrobe holding a steaming mug. He looked at me, a smirk playing on his lips. What's the problem, property manager? Construction going smoothly. I pointed to the obvious encroachment. This is on the common easement, Sterling, and part of it is on my private property. You cannot build here, you have no permits. This is illegal. He leaned in, his eyes narrowed. I told you I was doing this. You didn't stop me, did you? You're the property manager. It's your job to prevent these kinds of issues. If you weren't clear enough, or if you didn't physically stop them, then that's on you. Seems like gross negligence to me. Maybe I should report you to the board. He was attempting to shift the blame, to make me complicit by not becoming an active obstructionist. That was the moment. The exact second his words hung in the air, trying to pin his mess on me. The game changed. My blood ran cold, but my mind became crystal clear. I stopped arguing. I stopped trying to reason. I just looked at him, gave a slow, deliberate nod, and walked back to my house. Sterling likely interpreted my silence as defeat, or perhaps grudging acceptance. He was very, very wrong. For the next 4 weeks, I went into read-only mode. I didn't engage with Sterling. I let the construction continue, but I documented everything, every single thing. I set up a time-lapse camera overlooking his property from my second-story window, capturing the daily progress of the encroaching driveway and the illegally large gate. I took hundreds of high-resolution photographs with my phone, each one geotagged and timestamped, showing the exact measurements of the encroachment onto the easement and my land. I flew my drone over his property twice a week, capturing aerial views of the expanding concrete and rising stone gate, again with time-stamped footage. I kept a detailed log of every email, every phone call, every in-person conversation with Sterling, noting dates, times, and exact quotes. I highlighted the precise sections in the Northwood Acres HOA bylaws that were being violated. Architectural Review, Section 4.1. Property Lines and Easements, Section 3.2. Common Area Usage, Section 3.5. Construction Permits, Section 4.3. I cross-referenced these with city zoning ordinances and building codes, downloading copies of the public records and highlighting violations for lot coverage, setback requirements, and unauthorized construction on public easements. I built a mountain of evidence. I even took photos of the no trespassing signs I'd put up on the edge of my property where his concrete had started to spill over, proving I had, in fact, asserted my property rights. My plan was simple, precise, and utterly ruthless. Let Sterling build his monument to his ego. Let him sink hundreds of thousands into an illegal structure. Then, when it was complete, I would detonate the evidence. He had tried to make me complicit. He had tried to blame me. He had tried to bribe me. Now he would learn the true cost of malicious compliance from a dangerously patient man. The magnificent, sprawling concrete driveway was finished. The massive, imposing stone gate stood tall and proud, an arrogant declaration of Sterling's supposed dominance over the cul-de-sac. It was exactly 3 feet onto my property and a good 5 feet into the drainage easement, completely ignoring the legal boundaries. It was a monstrosity, and it was complete. 2 days later, the first letter arrived. Not from the HOA, but from the city's code enforcement department. It was a stop work and notice of violation. Sterling ignored it. He probably assumed I was behind it and thought he could just brush it off. But it wasn't me. Yet, the foreman, Dave, probably made an anonymous tip after I'd shown him the surveys. I waited one more day. Then, I compiled my meticulously organized evidence. A binder full of emails, a flash drive with all the photos and drone footage, a detailed timeline of events. I walked directly to the city planning department and sat down with a supervisor. I presented my case, clearly, calmly, and factually, for nearly an hour. They listened. They took notes. They were very interested in the evidence of deliberate encroachment onto a public easement and private property without permits. A week later, a second, much sterner letter arrived at Sterling's house. This one was certified. It wasn't just a notice of violation. It was a final order for demolition and assessment of fines. It stipulated immediate removal of all unauthorized structures, a hefty fine for each day the violation continued, and a larger fine for commencing construction without permits and on an easement. It also stated that if he failed to comply, the city would proceed with the demolition, and Sterling would be billed for all costs plus a penalty. Sterling stormed over to my house, his face purple, veins bulging in his neck. "What the hell is this? You did this, didn't you, you pathetic little bureaucrat?" He slammed the letter down onto my porch table, making my coffee mug jump. "You let me build this. You were supposed to manage the community. Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you warn me this would happen?" I looked at him, my expression unmoving. "I warned you repeatedly, Sterling. I provided you with copies of the bylaws. I showed you the property surveys. I sent you emails explicitly detailing the easement and property line restrictions. I even declined your offer to make it worth my while to ignore the rules. My warnings are all meticulously documented." I walked inside and returned with 3 thick binders, placing them on the table. Here, every email I sent, every phone call I logged, every photo showing the encroaching construction, timestamped and geotagged, drone footage, copies of the city ordinances and HOA bylaws you violated, highlighted for your convenience. I opened one binder, pointing to a highlighted section. Section 3.2, Property Lines and Easements. Section 4.3, Construction Permits, all very clear. His jaw dropped. He stared at the binders, then at me. His face contorted, a mix of disbelief and sputtering rage. You set me up. This is malicious." "No, Sterling," I replied, my voice calm, almost clinical. "This is a consequence of your choices. You chose to ignore every warning. You chose to build without permits. You chose to encroach on an easement and my private property. My job is to enforce the rules, not to physically restrain you from breaking them. Your words that it was my fault for not stopping you simply confirmed your intent to disregard regulations. This is not my setup. This is your chickens coming home to roost." 2 weeks later, the city's demolition crew arrived. It was early morning. Sterling's German SUV was parked on the street, not half on the sidewalk this time. The crew, led by the same foreman, Dave, began systematically dismantling the massive stone gate. Jackhammers tore into the beautiful, expensive concrete driveway, revealing the rough earth beneath. It was a messy, loud, and utterly destructive process. Sterling stood on his porch, watching, occasionally yelling at the workers, who simply ignored him. That evening, the HOA board held an emergency meeting, called by Sterling himself, who demanded my immediate termination. He accused me of negligence, harassment, and orchestrating the entire demolition. I arrived with my 3 binders of evidence, plus an additional folder containing the city's demolition order and the itemized bill for the work, which had already been forwarded to Sterling. I presented my case dispassionately, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. The board members, many of whom had already complained about Sterling's behavior, listened intently. They reviewed the emails, the photos, the drone footage, and my meticulously kept logs. It took less than 15 minutes for them to reach a unanimous decision. Not only was I fully exonerated, but my diligence was commended. Sterling, however, was in deep trouble. The board informed him that he was not only responsible for the city's demolition bill and fines, but the HOA would be seeking reimbursement for its own legal fees, the damage to the common drainage easement, and the cost to restore my property line. He faced a lawsuit from the HOA if he didn't comply, on top of the ongoing daily fines from the city for noncompliance. His face, already purple, seemed to deflate, his arrogance replaced by a dawning terror. Update 1. 3 weeks after the demolition, Sterling's house looked like a war zone. The front was an ugly mess of broken concrete, exposed dirt, and twisted rebar. He put the house up for sale, but local realtors were quietly telling me that no one was interested. The property values in Northwood Acres were historically stable, but a house with a huge, obvious violation history, an ongoing dispute with the HOA, and a massively damaged front yard was a hard sell, especially when the listing price didn't reflect the need for tens of thousands in repairs. The rumor mill suggested he was hemorrhaging money on fines alone. Update 2. About a month after that, Sterling finally sold the house. It went significantly below market value, a staggering loss for him, I was told. The new owners, a young couple, closed quickly, eager for a fixer-upper bargain, unaware of the full drama that had unfolded. Sterling was gone, his oversized German SUV, his loud parties, his demands, and his aura of entitled arrogance all vanished from Northwood Acres. A quiet cheer, unheard but palpable, seemed to ripple through the cul-de-sac. Mrs. Henderson finally got a full night's sleep. Update 3. It's been a few more weeks. The new couple, the Millers, are lovely. They actually came over with a homemade apple pie to introduce themselves and ask about the community rules, genuinely wanting to fit in. They've already started hiring local contractors to repair the driveway, restore the proper property lines, and build a charming, regulation-compliant picket fence along the front. The peaceful hum has returned to Northwood Acres. Sterling Blackwood is now just a cautionary tale whispered between neighbors, a ghost of arrogance past, probably stewing in some other unsuspecting community, completely unaware that his downfall was meticulously orchestrated by the very pathetic little bureaucrat he so casually dismissed.